Welcome to Conversations with Neil Andrews. This program brings major issues facing the City of Ventura into wider public view, promoting timely discussion directly with the people involved in, concerned with, or affected by those issues. Councilman Andrews provides candid discussions regarding vital matters affecting city politics and political life, including key decisions that your city council and administration face. Andrews is committed to bringing you the pros and cons of these important issues with his unique perspectives based on many years of experience in business and government. We hope you'll enjoy the dialogue.
Hello, and welcome to Conversations with Neil Andrews. My topic today is the pension reform issue, compensation and pension reform issue facing the city. I have as my guest Ed McCombs. Ed is a former city manager and is the chairman of the City Council appointed Special Task Force on Compensation and Pension Issues. A year ago, I asked the Council to begin to consider the impacts of our compensation policies on our budgets because we were facing a very severe budget crisis. We had to cut $11.5 million out of last year's budget. We'll have to cut another $4 million out of this year's budget. And those cuts are very, very serious. In July, the Council agreed to appoint a special compensation and pensions task force. And that task force has been meeting regularly since that time. And Mr. McCombs is the chair of that task force, and so welcome, and I'm glad to have you here.
Well, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Good. Now, the issues that we're trying to deal with have to do with both the nature of our pension system, the impacts of the pension system on our general budget, and the impact of the entire compensation package on our general budget. The basic problem that we've faced is that our employee costs, our salary, compensation, benefits, and so forth, have been rising much more rapidly than our revenue streams. Now, that was a problem before, but when we went into recession and our revenues began to decline significantly, it became a very severe problem. Ed, now that we've had this task force meeting for several months, we've dealt first with the notion of what represents competitive compensation a little bit, and we've dealt with the question of what are the alternatives that we might look at to our pension system. Now, shortly we'll have a report that comes to the Council from the task force. But I think that at this point, I'd just like to recap some of those discussions that we've had. In particular, let's start with the question of competitive compensation and how that was framed in the discussions with the task force. On the one hand, there were the notion that to be competitive, we have to have the same kind of compensation and pension system that other communities, other cities have. The other side of that notion was that competitive was not comparative, but in fact competitive should be defined as the level of compensation necessary to give you the level of services you want. I think that was about the way it shaped up.
That's right. That's very well put. The question which was raised was a very appropriate one. For many, many years, cities and counties and special districts have gone through a process of defining what jurisdictions they wanted to be competitive with. And it was felt that this was very important from the standpoint of being able to recruit high caliber employees and to retain them once you had them. So this kind of a process has been what cities and counties and special districts have been doing for many years. But kind of the crunch has come, and it's necessary to take a hard look at how we've been doing salary setting compensation levels all the way around. So the question that was raised was a very appropriate one. Are there other ways of going about it that would be much more, which would enable a city council, for example, to take a look at increasing emphasis on what its ability to pay was, as opposed to trying to keep up with everyone within the county or whatever the case might be. Well, I think that it was apparent to those of us on the task force that Ventura City Council's policy on compensation was carefully thought through. It was one, and continues to be one, which is trying to maintain at least close to the average of what other comparable jurisdictions are paying. At your request, a lot of thought was given to how can we do this differently. One full session was devoted to some considerations of thoughts that the city manager had come up with in terms of, okay, maybe what we can do is to concentrate on making the employees aware of the fact that they are part of a first-class organization delivering top-flight service, where their services are highly recognized and viewed as important, where there is a lot of camaraderie amongst the employees. They're known to be excellent in terms of what they do, and perhaps it's possible to do those things which will cause the organization to become increasingly good in what it does, while de-emphasizing somewhat the competitive aspect of the salary situation. This got a lot of discussion, and as a matter of fact, the task force, which includes 3 public members, as you've indicated, 3 council members, and 8 representatives of employee groups, basically decided to stay with the current policy, while at the same time addressing how to raise the level of perfection within the organization. As I recall, that's the way it went.
Yes, I think that was the outcome of the discussion. The protocol, or the guidelines rather, for the competitive compensation idea that the city has been using is open enough that first it permits us to set compensation irrespective of what others do within the means available, within the revenue available. So that's the first thing. The second thing is it does, while it sets an expectation that our compensation will be relatively comparable to the average of other communities, by the same token, while it sets that, it does not lock us into it allows us to consider other factors as well. And so it was deemed to have enough breadth and flexibility that it could continue to be used. I would point out that historically, however, we have not availed ourselves of that flexibility. And the council has, in fact, often looked simply at what is the average that other communities are paying. And that's been a problem. I, half tongue-in-cheek, have said that what that does is it makes us the captive of the, as I think I phrased it, the weakest, stupidest, and most incompetent of elected officials in other communities.
You make the point well, Neil. I think that one of the things that I've been impressed with in that policy that the council has adopted, has had in force for some time, It is said repeatedly that all of this has to be considered within the realm of the financial capability of the city, as you just
Right.
outlined, and I think that is a saving grace, but of course that does mean that the city's policy-making body has to take a hard position from time to time when these issues come up for consideration, and if the money isn't there, the money isn't there. Now, I've been impressed as a former longtime city manager with how this city has worked assiduously to bring its budgets into balance, even though that is an extremely difficult process, or has been the last year and a half or so. It is impressive that you aren't spending down reserves inappropriately, which is sometimes what governmental jurisdictions do.
Well, we've tried very hard and worked very hard at maintaining our budget within the revenue available. One of the disadvantages that we have in the city of Ventura, by comparison to some of these other communities, is that we pay for our public safety out of our general fund. We don't have any special funds available to us. The county, for example, in their fire department has the fire district special assessment. The county also, for the sheriff's department, has the Prop 172 funds that go to them. And so it makes it really difficult for us to use general fund monies to cover what other communities are being able to cover with special money.
That's a very good point, because the general fund then has to bear the burden, a much broader burden,
right,
than these other communities have to do, and it's you're talking about other communities within Ventura County, which, for example, have the benefit of being in the county fire district or whatever, and that takes a big chunk away from them having to take it from their general fund.
Right.
There's no question about it.
Well, the thing about it is that because they have special money and they don't have to take it out of the general fund, they have a great deal more flexibility than we have. For every dollar we spend on compensation in these public safety areas, and I focus on those because those are the ones that are typically covered by special funds elsewhere, every dollar we spend to be competitive in that area takes money away from our parks program, our streets program, and everything else that the city does. And as the chair of our finance committee and budget committee this past year, cutting that $11 million, I can assure you we cut down to real muscle, and we don't have any fat left. We're down to muscle in those other areas, streets, parks, community services, and so forth.
Well, the scary part of that, Neil, from my point of view, is that because you've cut down to the muscle, there are things that should be being done in the way of preventative maintenance of streets,
right,
buildings, a variety of different kinds of facilities which can't be done. So what it's going to wind up doing is meaning that their costs are going to be higher in the long run. And that's the unfortunate part of it all, and that's why I'm so pleased as a long-term resident of Ventura that the council appointed the task force. We are at least in a position to take a hard look at what the longer-term future may hold.
right.
And that's something that every city ought to spend a good deal of time on, trying to avoid getting into the situations that cause what you've just gone through in the last year or so with these major cuts.
Yes, as a matter of fact, the mission and purpose of the task force